Hello, fans, friends, family, fellow dwellers of the unknown, mystery seekers,
McFappers.
McFappers. Welcome. Thank you. Here is our next episode. And today, Rainey and I are exploring the wonderful world of I am looking into the Night Hag. And Rainey,
I am looking into the Kaput Bird.
So I know the last deep dive we did, I had mentioned I was going to look into the potentiality of looking into many different things. And none of those were the Night Hag. I changed my mind. So surprised. Today you get the Night Hag instead of, whatever else I said I was going to do. Housekeeping stuff, please go check out our family of podcasts over at the Alabama Take. Have a bunch of different podcasts over there dealing with pop culture stuff, so like sports and books and movies and music and Star Wars and all sorts of stuff. I do another podcast over there as well, not quite as family friendly, but it's called Punk Love and Compassion, where I interview various people throughout the greater punk rock community about how they got into punk and the importance of community. Lastly, like always, you're going to hear stuff in the background. Dogs, chickens, mom/wife, maybe some bodily functions. It happens. Things you will not hear in the background is Rainey nodding his head at me, which he likes to do, which cannot be picked up on my microphone. But he nods his head at me, or he scowls at me quite a lot, like he's doing right now. He's both scowling and nodding. Maybe you picked up on his little snorts. But yes, he does that. So, Rainey, who's going first?
You are.
Okay. So I looked into the Night Hag. And through this process, I believe that Night Hags and witches, well, not just I believe, but whatever. I'm going to make this gross generalizing statement that Night Hags and witches are two completely different things that often get mistaken for each other because people don't know. And I think it's more often that witches get mistaken, or Night Hags are often called witches, which isn't necessarily true. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But I believe witches are more nature-based and maybe not as mean-spirited as what the tales often tell. I mean, I'm sure they definitely can be. But I think often the bad review that witches get comes from them being misidentified as Night Hags, or Night Hags being misidentified as witches. So Night Hags are often like the uglier, warty, scary-looking things that are out. Like, all of them are out to get you. And with that, we'll get more into the research. So, what is a Night Hag? A Night Hag is a cross-cultural legendary figure often linked to the experience of sleep paralysis. So most people who experience a Night Hag are often in their rooms or somewhere where they are sleeping, and they wake up and cannot move. And they oftentimes see the Night Hag in their room. Night Hags have been written about in Shakespeare and Macbeth, as well as the great literary work of the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. So various parts in the great literature of mankind, from D&D to Shakespeare, have covered the Night Hag. As I said earlier, they're malevolent entities, often depicted as ugly, elderly female creatures that attack sleeping victims. A couple beliefs about them is that they were often believed to either sit on sleepers' chests, which cause the paralysis, and what they're doing in the process is basically feeding on the life force or feeding on your soul. Dungeons and Dragons, other fantasy games, night hags are powerful, fiendish creatures that invade dreams and steal souls. Again, going back, sleep paralysis. A more scientific description of night hags is that they represent universal sleep disorder experiences, fears about female power, or anxieties about the vulnerability during sleep. Night hag beliefs have also influenced sleeping practices, contributed to witch persecutions, and persist in how we discuss nightmares today. And in fact, talking about nightmares, the term nightmare actually comes or derives or is related to the term night hag. So the word nightmare comes from an Old English word, mare, which comes from a Germanic word, mara or mara. And for some reason, I didn't finish going into that description in my notes. I probably just cut it off somewhere. I'll get to it. Sorry about that. Sometimes I'm not as organized as I need to be. Regardless, okay, getting back to night hags, I'll get more into the root of the word here eventually, I hope. So like I said, like night hags, cross-cultural, goes back into mythology and oral traditions for centuries, both in pop culture, it's in medical literature. And so, excuse me, even though they're very cross-cultural, different cultures sort of see them differently or they're depicted differently. I'll get a lot more into the various cultures here in a little bit, but sort of general in Eastern Europe and Slavic and Turkish cultures, the hag is a woman who eats people, consumes their blood, or does other horrible things. They link to darkness, underworld, Kazakh, and other Turkic folklore portrays the hag figures as wicked elderly woman who threatens life and property, which sort of goes hand in hand with the sort of global archetype. Again, in folklore, it tells about them coming into people's bedrooms at night, either sitting on or pushing their victims' chests, making it difficult for them to move or call for help. They believe to either feed on their victim's breath, the vital life force or souls, making the victims very lethargic and afraid when they wake up. Some people thought the night hags ride their victims all night, which would give them unpleasant dreams to take their souls to wicked places. And individuals thought that the creatures primarily went after persons who were alone in bed or had done something bad or had somehow anchored the supernatural powers. I'm going to get sidetracked here for a minute. So throughout the course of this podcast and our research, some interesting things have happened. It's like in our last sort of dive, we discussed fairy circles, and in the process of this, we had never had a fairy circle in our yard before, and now we have fairy circles. There was the thing with the owl that we talked about a couple episodes ago. And then in the process of researching this, I have never had sleep paralysis before that I remember. And one night doing this, I woke up, was wide awake, and could not move. Like complete sleep paralysis. And it took a very forceful effort to first just move a foot, like one of my feet, not to move the actual distance of foot, but to move one of my feet. And from there, continuing like that forceful, purposeful effort to like get the rest of my body to move. And I just find these weird parallels or coincidences have happened since we've started this podcast, for me anyway. Okay, excellent. So here's more. God, I really should have organized these better, but I didn't. No, that's life. More on the history of the word. The word hag is an old word tracing back to Old English, but the term hag is pretty uncommon until about the 16th century. And at that point in time, it underwent sort of an explosion of usage and popularity. While today it simply means an ugly old woman, their history of the word indicates that it once meant something darker and more sinister. The Old English progenitor of the word hag is hagtessa, and it's, I don't know the correct word for this letter, but it's H-A-E, and the A-E is combined into one letter, G-T-E-S-S-E. And that meant a fury, basically, classical mythology fury, a witch or sorceress. One instance, it's anger personified. Old English word is relatively rare, appearing mostly in glosses of Latin texts that reference the Furies. Concept of the night hag or similar malevolent nocturnal entities also has deep historical and cross-cultural roots in human mythology and folklore. And nobody's been able to pinpoint like the exact origin of the term. Like I said earlier, they've appeared in various forms, mythologies from different cultures all over the world. So getting into a couple of those. So Scandinavian folklore, sleep paralysis is caused by mare, which is a supernatural creature related to the incubi or succubi. Mare is a damned woman who is cursed and her body is carried mysteriously during sleep and without her noticing. Newfoundland and Canada, South Carolina, Georgia, like the U.S., Georgia, describe the figure of the hag who leaves her physical body at night and sits on the chest of her victim. The victim usually wakes with a feeling of terror. In Fiji, experience is interpreted as the Kana Tevaro, K-A-N-A, new word T-E-V-O-R-O, being eaten by a demon. In many cases, the demon can be the spirit of a recently dead relative who has come back for some unfinished business, or who has come back to communicate some important news to the living. In Nigeria, it's referred to as ISP, appears to be more common, often referred to within African communities as the devil on the back, and it is called the Danal by the Hausa people. Turkey, it's called the Karabasan, and similar to two stories of demonic visitation during sleep. Southern U.S. referred to as being ridden by a witch or witch riding. Mongolian cultures refer to the verb phrase kardarak, which means to be pressed by the black. In Hmong culture, it's a nocturnal pressing spirit. Kurdish culture is often referred to as the Motaka, believed to be a demon that attacks people in their sleep, and particularly children of a young age, and steals their breath away as they breathe heavily and keeps it out of reach. Ethiopian culture, it's the Dukak, D-U-K-A-K, believed to be an evil spirit that possesses people during their sleep. Moroccan culture, known as the Bo-Ratat, two words, B-O-U-R-A-T-T-A-T, demon that presses and covers the sleeper body so they cannot move or speak. Icelandic folk culture, sleep paralysis is generally called having a mara or a goblin or a succubus, which is believed to cause nightmares. In Malta, folk culture attributes to sleep paralysis as an attack by Hadelia, who is married to Harry's, which is an entity in Maltese folk culture that haunts the individuals in ways similar to a poltergeist. And again, somehow I cut off that part of my research, but the term nightmare comes from and is related to, the night hag. Yes, that's the night hag. And we've talked to a couple people who have had night hag experiences, still working on trying to get them to figure out a date and time to get them on the show. But hopefully we'll get at least one of them on soon. So, resources that I use for this, one was connectparanormal.net, wordorigins.org, mythicalcreatures.info, and Wikipedia. That's what I got. What are your feelings on that, Rainey?
I find it interesting that like all of these ancient cultures sort of had like the same idea, and like they never could have met each other. And
yeah, like you're talking about, like cultures from all over the world all having,
yeah,
the same experience, same idea.
yeah.
Yeah. So you think it really is just more like a psychological thing where it's like we're asleep and we can't move and we have no control over our bodies. So we're blaming it on this mythical creature, or it's just a purely mental thing? Or do you think it might be a combination?
A combination.
Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. Has a weird demonic looking woman ever been hanging out in your room at night? No.
No.
That's good. Why shouldn't do that? The dogs probably keep it away.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other thoughts on this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Are you ready for the Kaput Bird? Tell us the wondrous stories of the Kaput Bird.
One second.
Take your time.
Okay, so the Kaput bird is a unfortunate species of bird which has one wing that's shorter than the other. This imbalance means the Kaput bird can only fly in circles. Typically, the issue is of no concern, as it just flies in slow, wide circles, lands on the branch, adjusts itself, and takes off again in the correct direction. However, the Kaput bird scares easily, and when it's scared, it flies very fast. This is where the bird runs into problems, because the faster it flies, the smaller the circle it flies in. When the bird fails to make any distance, it flies even faster. As all pilots know, this causes a phenomenon known as accelerated circling, in which faster flying results in smaller circles. In the case of the Kaput bird, the smaller circles result in faster flying, which result in even smaller circles, and so forth until the Kaput bird is traveling at such fast speeds and in such small circles that Kaput, his head goes right up his backside. The unfortunate bird then falls to the ground in a lump. Since the Kaput bird always gains altitude as it circles, there usually isn't much to look at after they go kaput. As a result, no one knows exactly what these birds look like. From the fleeting glimpses people get of them before they take off, they seem to be decent-sized birds, somewhat resembling woodpeckers. Most experts agree that these birds have become quite endangered. They likely originally lived a peaceful life behind the canopy of central Maine's ancient pine forests, where they weren't disturbed. Once those forests began being lodged, the word of the bird's wing length made their decline inevitable. And that's all I have for the Kaput bird.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I could only find one source, and the source was Mythical Creatures of Maine book.
Gotcha. So what you're telling me is this bird flies in such tight circles at such a high speed that its head
Kaput goes into its backside.
And what exactly is its backside?
I don't know.
I think you know exactly what its backside is. You just don't want to say it.
I also think that what its backside is.
Yeah, but the Kaput bird, this is your creature. This is your choice. So it's up to you to describe to us what happens when its head meets its backside.
Its backside is its butt.
And so its head then gets lodged into its booty. And the sound it makes when it happens. What a horribly sad name for a creature.
Yeah.
It got named after its head traveling at a magnificent speed, gets lodged into its own booty.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I think it also makes the kaput sound when it falls onto the ground.
Gotcha. Or it extricates its head from the booty. Huh. So this is the second creature that you have explored with one side smaller than the other side,
Yeah.
coming from New England. Something's in the water up there.
Yep.
You know, I mean, what's up? You know, you got creatures with legs shorter than the other, have birds with wings shorter than the other. But you just have a fascination with oddly sized appendages.
Maybe.
Huh. So what drew you to, like, you know what? More people need to learn about kaput.
I thought it was fascinating that it was like the Sandhill Gouger.
Gotcha. So you thought people just needed to learn about a bird that was similar to the short-legged gouger, and not the fact that there was a creature that got his head stuck in his butt.
Yeah.
Huh. Huh. Have you ever tried to get your head stuck in your
No.
backside? And what kind of
No.
noise that would make? I bet it would be a stinky
No.
noise.
Probably.
Okay. Well, what do we have next?
Oh. like what? Like what crypto games?
Sure. So we have a couple interviews that we knocked out, and sometimes we don't always do these things in order.
Oh wait,
yeah. So we have a couple interviews that we knocked out. Our great listening fan base, and so a couple interviews that we knocked out of things coming up, and they both happen the same day. So it's really just what order we get to editing them. But the next two interviews that you will hear on our wonderful, informational, serious show is one, we talked to one of our former guests' daughters, and they are from a tribe in Maine, and they share with us many stories of creatures that their tribe has interacted with. Do you want to give a brief nutshell of like the mountain story?
Yes, their tribe has a treaty with Bigfoot and spouted mountain.
Mount Katahdin.
Yeah. So basically, none of their tribe could go onto Mount Katahdin.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, so like Rainey said, like, anyway, we'll let them sort of tell the whole story. But they have very many, very, very fascinating stories. So you should tune in to that one. And then we also talked to a gentleman from New York named Alistair, and he talked to us about do you remember what it was called, Rainey?
The Blueprint.
Correct.
Also Trunco.
And Trunco, yeah. So, and again, just very nutshell things is both of these things sort of happened in the southern hemisphere in the ocean. And so yeah, she talks to us about the bloop, about Trunco. And then we just sort of go off on various tangents and theories about just the craziness of the ocean and what could theoretically, still exist in the ocean, since we know less about the ocean than we do about, outer space. So yeah, so very, very interesting conversations with all of the above. And then, so you'll hear one of those. You'll hear our next deep dive. Rainey, do you know what you're going to dive into next?
I think I'm going to do the beaver shark.
The beaver shark. Does the beaver shark have like one tooth shorter than the other?
I don't know.
Does the beaver tooth get its appendages stuck in orifices?
I don't think so.
Okay. Is the beaver shark from Maine?
I don't know.
Okay. So the beaver shark. I'm interested to hear about the beaver shark. And what am I going to do? I don't know what I'll do. I might go back and do Deadwater, like I talked about before. I might do Deadwater. I might look into that weird thing in Antarctica, but I'm still feeling a little heartbroken over my Antarctic cryptids. Or, who knows? I might get an itch to do something else. Some other weird experience might happen to me, and I'll get dragged down a different rabbit hole. But regardless, you'll hear it all next time on McFap, which is
Mythical, cryptid, fae, alien, and the paranormal.
And in closing,
don't be like the squonk.
And don't pee in fairy circles. Until next time, friends, we are out.